Welcome to the latest episode of Leverage. I'm honored to have the owner, Alan Carson of Carson Dunlop, with me today to talk all about home inspections. If you know me, if you've bought or sold with me, I have all sorts of opinions on home inspections, good, bad, and the ugly. And who else to have on but the leader in the industry? So welcome.
Rachel, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, I think that I think there are a lot of great home inspectors out there. I have to say, I actually am very partial to one. I'll give a shout out to Phil if anybody's ever, not that you don't have amazing home inspectors right across the board, but I always go to Carson Dunlop specifically because, and we were just talking about this, that there are such variations in the market. And I actually think it's very similar to agents. Like there's lots of good, bad, and the ugly about agents. So, so welcome. So we were just talking before the camera started, something that I actually wasn't aware of. I was under the understanding that legislation had been passed in 2016 or 17 to regulate home inspectors. So for all that you don't know, this home inspectors do not have a regulatory body. Anyone can become a home inspector. So I would love to know now, how does someone become a home inspector? Like I'm Rachel Levy. I've decided I'm going to change my profession. I'm no longer going to sell houses and I want to be a home inspector. How do I do that?
Well, I'm going to give you two answers.
Okay.
I'm going to give you the wrong way first.
Okay, sure.
And that is you hang out a shingle, print up some cards and say, I'm now a home inspector. And Rachel Levy can be a home inspector by 5 p.m. this evening. Scary.
Really?
That is terrifying, but that is true.
So there's nothing that you have to do to prove that you are. I thought there's a course. Is there not a course? I actually know someone who took the course and didn't end up doing it.
Let me give you the second answer then,
okay, great.
Which you're leading me into nicely. Thank you.
Okay. So, I thought the big reveal was do it through Carson Dunlop.
Yes and no. So, no, there are lots of ways that are the right way. Okay. And there is not a course. We have a 10-course program. So Carson Dunlop, we've been around since 78. So home inspection business was and is our core entity. But we also train home inspectors across Canada. We have software that home inspectors use across North America. We have a commercial inspection company. We own a franchise in the United States with 200 franchises. So we have lived and breathed home inspection for 45 years. Our education program for home inspectors is a post-secondary 10-course program that is offered through Carson Dunlop. We're also a private career college, and it's also offered through, I think, 20 of the 24 community colleges in Ontario. Okay. So it is a significant education program. It's about 420 hours of work, and anyone wanting to be a home inspector and serious about it takes that course. It is far and away the most popular course across Canada for getting into the home inspection business. And I say course, meaning it's a program of 10 courses.
How long, sorry to interrupt you, how long does it take to complete? Yeah.
It depends how you do it. If you do it through us, the program has moved from classroom to substantially online, which is the way the world's going. So you can sign up and take our program. And we have some students who have been either laid off or are not working, and they can do it full time. Okay. And so 420 hours, so they can do it in 2 or 3 months.
Right, okay.
And that's the book learning part. And then if you take it through community colleges, they typically offer, people can take 3 or 4 courses per semester. Mm-hmm. So it might take 12. If they do the 3 semesters for the year, it might take about a year to complete.
So I think this is really important when you're working with, anybody out there who wants to, for example, buy a property and the listing agent has done a home inspection. I think it's super, super important. And I do say this to my clients all the time. I want to know who the company was that it came from, because you want to know that it's worth the paper that it's printed on and is the value. I'm actually a big proponent, even if they did a listing home inspection, to have my buyers do their own.
Good for you.
But I think that I think that as a buyer, you should ask your agent who that company is, whether they're reputable. We're here to say Carson Dunlop is definitely a leader, but there are other ones that are reputable and do run a very tight ship. And then also, if you're listing your home, you want to, and I always say that to clients, that, if you are listing your home, you want to make sure that when someone shows up, they see that kind of seal of approval. Like it's already been done. It's been done professionally. There is a brand name and you've done it the right way. So you've been around since 1978. Yep. So my story, I love telling this story. It's a little bit horrifying, is I was 22 years old when I bought my first house. And I remember my agent said, it was an older bungalow. It was like at Marley and Eglinton. And she said, I think we should get a home inspection. And I'm like, no, don't worry about it. My friend's father is a contractor. He's a builder. He'll come. And to this day, she always reminds me, he walked in and he kind of jumped on the floors. And, he turned on the taps and she was just mortified. And he was like, yeah, no, it's good. And listen, I believe that there are probably some out there that still do that. What have you seen change?
Well, it's funny because when we started, nobody in Canada was doing it. So we didn't have a sales challenge or a marketing challenge. We had an education challenge. And the best analogy we could come up with was, if you're going to buy a used car, would you have somebody check it out? And the answer was always, of course. So if you're going to buy a home that costs 50 times as much, doesn't the same logic apply? Right.
I asked you that just before. I was like, if you're going to, and I say that I'm very conscious of clients spending money, and $600 is a lot of money to a lot of people. So, and that's average. I'm just throwing that out. An average cost to do a home inspection, let's say with Carson Dunlop, I just booked one an hour ago, what is around that. So $600 to $700, and it's a decent amount of money, right? It could be also used for all sorts of things. But if you are going to spend $1 million on average on a home, that percentage of that cost is, what did you say it was?
It's about 1/20th of 1%.
Right. So it's worth it. And I talked about a couple of ways that I thought it was very, had a lot of use. I mean, one is if you're a first-time buyer. And what I really do like about the inspection process for first-time buyers is they're able to walk through and understand, your guys will tell how often you should change your filters on your furnace and all of that stuff. So, but on the other hand, if you are buying something that you're just not 100% sure of, even though you may know it's fine, having a third party tell you, we've checked everything, and although there is that buyer beware type of, anything can happen, it has great value.
Absolutely. And even the most savvy buyers are probably not going to get up on the roof. They're probably not going to poke their head up into the attic. They're probably not going to pull the cover off the furnace and the air conditioner. Right. And so home inspection, you asked what had changed, and it's kind of moved from a cottage industry when it started with a lot of sort of one-man shops working out of a pickup truck to a profession that it's evolving to. And the licensing efforts that you talked about were taken pretty seriously by the government. It's really unfortunate that they didn't move through with it. But the whole thing has become much more a professional consulting practice than it was at the outset. And so it's headed in the right direction that way. With the absence of regulation, there are still, to my earlier point, anyone can be a home inspector.
Right.
The market has to self-police that. So you want to ask questions about, are your inspectors registered home inspectors? Are they members of the Canadian Association of Home and Property Inspectors? Or are they members of the Ontario Association of Home Inspectors? And both of those organizations are reputable, and they require inspectors to have appropriate insurance to protect their clients and so on. So there are those logical steps, and those are some of the changes that have taken place, that it has become much more professional.
I mean, I would imagine you can tell me as we have seen the average cost of sale of a home also increase.
Oh, yeah.
The instinct to spend the money to make sure you're buying a good investment. It's very similar. I mean, I remember no one staged a home 20 years ago. I mean, it just didn't warrant it. agents would be working for free. And I would imagine that you've seen the same influx of, it becoming much more of a norm versus it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
Well, 100%. And interestingly, the cost of a home inspection has not moved up nearly as quickly as the cost of homes. Right. So as a percentage of the investment, which is negligible to begin with, it's actually gotten smaller. So home inspection has become better value, if anything, than it was before, and it has become a better service. The product and the reports have gotten much stronger, much clearer, much more consumer friendly, much more usable for the average person. Right. And before we started recording, we talked about talking to people, kind of meeting them at their level instead of trying to intimidate people. And so I think of ourselves not so much as in the home inspection business as in the communication business. And our job is to take a whole series of hundreds of sort of evaluations and decisions that we make during a home inspection and then translate those and communicate them to a home buyer or seller in language that they can understand. So our role, it's like anything else. It looks easy from the outside, but what's going on the inside is a whole lot of processing, decision-making, evaluating, and then saying, how am I going to communicate this in the clearest possible way?
One of the things I've found interesting, and by the way, I agree with you. I think that managing expectations and explaining it in detail, in a very combative way, not a combative way, is so important because it's a big decision and there's a lot of emotions. And there are clients who are much more fearful and risk adverse than others. And as I mentioned, I have clients that have bought homes with me without a home inspection, and I sleep at nights because I know that they're very savvy. They're either going to do their work themselves. They're prepared for whatever they find behind the walls, all of that good stuff. And there's always something behind the walls.
Of course there is.
And so it leads me to my next question. And I do manage this with clients when we do a home inspection. And I get asked this a lot. Is it worth it? Should I do a home inspection? And I do put it a little bit on that the home buyer needs to understand what their risk assessment is, because I do believe that a home inspection can't tell you everything, right? So I think it would be great to walk through what you feel a home inspection does really well, and then also maybe manage expectations of what a home inspection does not do.
That's a great question, and very few people stop to think about that. And so a home inspection, the goal of it is it's a professional consulting practice. It's designed to tell a buyer, a seller, or an owner the physical condition of the property from a functional standpoint at the time of the inspection. So that's a whole mouthful.
I was going to say, we need to break that down. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, when I say talk about the physical condition, we're not talking about the cosmetics. We're not talking about bylaws or codes. And by the way, people say, does the house meet code? Here's a short answer. Absolutely not. No, right. No house meets code. In fact, even the ones that are just built often don't comply with code. Right. But understand, when people say code, there's the building code, there's the electrical code, there's the plumbing code, there's the gas code. There are a ton of codes that houses have to meet. The other thing you should know is that codes change about every 3 years. So by the time a house is 10 years old, it's been through a number of code changes, and it almost certainly does not meet what the current code is.
That's a really good point. I actually just had to redo the insulation of my attic. My house is 15 years old, and I had to put extra venting in because when it was built, it was one, and now it's a different one. So that's a very good point from a code. I've never been asked about code, but yeah.
So our focus is on the performance of the house. So right. Because we don't fuss about codes, we understand codes and we know why they're there. Right. But we talk to consumers in their language. And so we say, you can make an electrical improvement to the outlets on your kitchen counter, and it's a safety improvement, and you should do that. We right. don't talk about codes. We say, this would make your house safer for you and your family.
Yes, you do suggestions for sure.
That's
for
right.
sure. I also feel like you also manage what type of investment a buyer might have to put into their home, like in the short term versus the long term. So I give the explanation that it's going to give you an overall high level presentation or synopsis of this home. So you want to know how old your air conditioner is. You want to know how old your furnace is. You want to make sure, well, that, there isn't any sign of moisture in your basement, for example. You want to know how old your roof is, or whether, the seal in the window is broken. But what I do say, on the other hand, is we don't necessarily know always, unless the agent or the owner has it, is how well it's being kept up. So, and I'll get to it in a minute, but I think that what we can't see necessarily is foundational issues. We can't tell whether something was done with a permit. Lots of people I've been through enough houses to see a sagging in a ceiling to know that people take walls down all the time. They say pretty much you have to, according to the city, you probably have to have a permit for absolutely anything next to painting a room. So it leads me to the next point, which I find interesting because I've been in homes who have a furnace, for example, that's 15 years old, and it's a top of the line furnace. It works really, really well. There's no need to change it, but you will put actual ages in your home inspection. So you'll say, okay, we say that air conditioners will last up to 8 years, and this one's 5 years. So unaware homeowner might be like, oh my God, in 3 years I have to change this air conditioner. I'm really curious where you get those lifespans.
Right. Well, I hope we don't ever tell anybody that an air conditioner fails in 8 years, because that's pretty short. So what we typically say is 10 to 15 years for an average air conditioner.
Okay. I might have gotten that wrong, but yeah.
But we don't, and we don't say you need to replace, and during the inspection we often talk about here, these are statistical averages.
Okay.
And they come from RS means, cost estimating guidelines, Marshall Swift, and so on. But we start there, and then we apply our knowledge and experience. We have about 70-odd employees at Carson Dunlop, so we use real-world experience to provide what I'm going to call local modifiers to those, to say what happens in Toronto, because some of the numbers are kind of more nationally focused. So we refine the numbers to suit where we work in the GTA. So, and the goal is, you put it very well, when we provide a home inspection report, we tell people, first of all, that houses are meant to live for a very long time, but some of the systems in them, just like my clothes, are designed to use for a few years and then replace. And
Right.
furnaces, air conditioners, water heaters, roofs, and so on.
Right.
So a house with an old roof or an old furnace is not a bad house. There's nothing wrong with the house. But from a financial standpoint and a budgeting and a planning standpoint, if I'm a homeowner, I want to know that I should be thinking about that in
Right.
5 years.
Right.
So our goal is to help people make really good decisions about their home. Our goal is to help people prepare a little bit and understand what's coming. And that's why in our reports we talk about, here's what you have, here's the efficiency of the furnace, here's the age of the furnace, here's the typical life expectancy of the furnace, and if it's getting close to the end, we'll give a range for the cost. Now, not all home inspectors do that, and we give a very broad range, because you can spend $3,000 or $8,000 for a furnace, depending on you talked about top-of-the-line furnace and so on.
Oh, yeah.
So you can buy a baseline builder's model, or you can buy a luxury Carrier Infinity furnace.
It depends on the size of the house and all that, so for sure.
And the fancy energy savings features like
Right.
the ACM motors and all the
Right.
bells and whistles. It's kind of
Right.
like buying a car. You can kind of start with the base car
Totally.
and then add a bunch of options on.
Totally.
So very much the same. So we want to give people that sense of, here's where we are. And it's one of the reasons we don't add up all the things in a home inspection report and say, here's all the things that are wrong, because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to do it, because it's a timeline, as you put quite well. It's a timeline that people are looking at. So as you move in, and over the years, things are going to need attention. And so we try to give you that long-term view so that you can make the right decisions for you and your family.
I also think so the reason that I had that adverse reaction to it was because I think that there would be buyers who may not have a great collaborative relationship with their agent, and they may just look at that number and say, I need that much money off of the price. And it becomes a negotiation, which, by the way, I think that there are things that may get uncovered in a buyer's inspection that warrants that the seller may not even have noticed. Or I mean, I literally have never been up in my attic, and I only found out I needed more insulation was because I had something coming through my ceiling. So that's another thing. Like, just because someone put it up on the market doesn't mean they went up in their attic lately or they're trying to hide anything. And actually I think the fact that you do give a range is very helpful, because I get clients who will say to me, well, okay, well, it needs a new air conditioner. How much is that going to cost me? And I can say, based on my experience, and by the way, your agent should know this, how much, any kind of air conditioner installed, or a furnace or flooring, and just general, but they should know to manage that expectation. I'd love to know what you see in the sense of whether you do more buyer's inspections or listing inspections, because I'm a big, big fan of pre-list inspections, and very similar reasoning for you in the sense of the reason for and what you want to deliver in your report is I'm all about pricing properly. And so when an agent comes to me and tries to negotiate money off of a pricing, I can just refer back to the listing, the pre-list, and say, I knew that. I knew we had an old air conditioner, or I knew that we needed more insulation, or I knew the roof was old. So I'm just curious whether you see a lot of agents doing pre-list.
Yeah, and let me give you two thoughts. First of all, in my world, a home inspection was never meant to be a negotiating tool to beat somebody down on the price.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. Unfortunately, in certain markets, it definitely is.
And I understand. And certainly in America, it's even worse than it is in Canada. Yeah.
Okay.
And so the pre-listing inspection question is fascinating, because I will say that I think that's how real estate should be sold across the board. I think every home should have a pre-listing inspection. I think inspections that are done for the buyer after the negotiation has been completed feels completely backwards to me nowadays. Where else in the world would you go and agree to buy a car and then take it out for a test drive and check the specifications of it?
Right.
Why wouldn't you find out what it is that you're buying before you negotiate? And then I feel bad for buyers, sellers, and agents when they negotiate, agree on a price, say, let's get a home inspection. The buyer says, oh my gosh, I thought the house was going to be perfect. And now they're not happy and they want to go back and they want to renegotiate.
That's actually how it's a good point. I have a listing coming up, and I have the same conversation with all my listing clients, and said, listen, I like to do a home inspection, and this is why. And one of the things is that I like to avoid surprises.
Absolutely.
So we don't want to get to a point where this is the amount of money we've agreed upon, and then they go in and they're like, well, we saw maybe signs of, so, close the deal with us for $20,000 less, or we're not closing. And that's really stressful on someone who's selling their house. It's very emotional. It can be taken very personal. And the conversation I had over the weekend was the seller said, I don't want to go through that. I want to decide on a price. I want to stick to it. And I do not want someone coming back to me. And I'll accept what you believe is the price of the home once we do the home inspection. And I think that a lot can be avoided. And I do agree with you. On that point, we had Max and I had a lawyer on a couple of episodes ago, and we were talking about home inspections. And I had so many comments on YouTube about it, but from U.S. agents or U.S. people saying that they have them written into their contracts, that it's much more standard.
Yeah, it is. And the negotiation, we have something built into our software that typically only gets used by our American home inspectors. And when they do a home inspection report, they allow the agent and the buyer to go in and extract stuff from the report to put into their amendments or addendums to the offer to go back to the seller and ask them to fix. And that's a matter of course in a lot of U.S. centers. So it's a little bit different world up here. I think getting around the whole problem, you asked about, how much of our business is pre-listing inspection. Through 2020 to 2022, it was about 70% of our inspections were for sellers. It's now down to maybe 55 or 60% as we're getting back to a more balanced market. But I've been pushing this idea since the late 1990s that pre-listing is really the right way to do it. It de-stresses the situation for all parties involved. It's win-win. There are no losers along the way. It's just the right way to do it. Why wouldn't you understand what it is you're buying when you're investing $1 million or $2 million?
I'd turn it on the flip side. As an agent, I want to know exactly what I'm putting out on the market. I want to be able to be sure and speak to my client confidently and say, we need to put this out as a well-loved home, but it has good bones. If it doesn't have good bones, I need to know that as an agent. A client who's been there a long time, or maybe someone who's a little elderly it's very important that agents do their due diligence. So again, going back to part of my marketing is making sure that I have that home inspection so that I know that I'm marketing it properly, right? And it really amazes me that, $700 is a barrier to.
It seems so incredible to me. And unfortunately, we're also headed in the way of Americans in terms of litigation. And certainly through the pandemic and so on, we're seeing a lot more unhappy buyers coming back to sellers after the fact and say, I didn't know this. I think you covered it up. We just went through one a week and a half ago. Our inspection manager was in. It involved us. It involved the seller. It involved the listing agent. And it was completely unfair. And it substantially got dismissed. Okay. But it puts everybody through so much stress. And it is
stress. And legal fees.
And it's all unnecessary. It really doesn't need to be there.
And there was a list, and so there was, sorry, for everybody who's listening, it's like, what happened? There was a pre-listing inspection, or? There was, and there was a buyer who didn't pay attention and said, oh, wait a minute, I relied on your pre-listing inspection. And then he got some horror. I'm going to throw in a little piece of advice. There's a very hot topic floating around now that is called Kitech piping. Oh, it's been hot topic for a while. And it's shocking. I sold a condo last year, sold 2 condos in the same building back to back that had Kitech plumbing. Mm-hmm. And I called the agents in the most recent listings in that building because you legally have to say there was Kitech plumbing like in the listing or disclose it. And maybe 2 out of 5 of them had said nothing about it. And of the ones that had said nothing about it, they were like, what? They had no idea what I was talking about.
How would they know?
Because there was a flood in the building, because it was all being replaced. And so, like, it's actually really scary that so much is not, like, made aware. Anyway, sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you because a lot of people don't know what Kitech plumbing is.
Right. So it's a type of plastic piping, and to your point, Rachel, 2000...
Not used anymore. Not use it. They do not use it anymore.
Not since 2007 has it been manufactured, but we have found it in homes up to 2012 because all the plumbing supply places did not throw out their Kitech. They resold it.
But were they allowed to put it in?
Yes, it's not banned. There's a class action lawsuit. It was never recalled by the manufacturer. There are so many misconceptions around Kitech. First of all, it was and still is legal. The company's still there. They have a different product now that's plastic.
What? Yeah. There's like a multi-million-dollar class action lawsuit. Like every building. If you have Kitech in your condo and you don't tell your insurance company, they will not cover you. Like you can't get home insurance.
That's substantially true, although I do have a couple of insurance companies that we work with that if Carson Dunlop says it's okay, they will insure it, believe it or not. So there have been some problems. And high-rise condos are different than homes, by the way, when it comes to Kitech. Yeah. So Kitech in a house, I don't raise my eyebrows. I have some in my house. I have 5 children. 2 of my children who've bought houses have Kitech in their house. Yeah, I'm not that bright.
I don't like to be outnumbered.
But there is a lot of over-dramatic stuff. There was a $125 million lawsuit. That was across all of North America. So when you break it down on a per-home average, it was a pittance, and that ended in January of 2020.
But the issue the issue was when it was done in high-rises, it was massive damage because everything was so close together. I mean, just really like quick, high level, anything that basically was built on the Young Line from Shepherd all the way over to Bayview, all the way up to Steeles, Finch, I would say. every single one of those buildings was built with Kitech. That was that time frame in which it was, and they're all reputable builders. Like, it was considered the revolutionary plumbing product.
It still is. Everybody's going plastic now. Hardly anybody's using copper.
Right.
But just to put some perspective on it, my youngest daughter lives in a condo on King Street. It's about 12 years old, does not have Kitech piping. She had no water for 3 weeks because they were changing all the piping in the high-rise. So I will say that the problems aren't restricted to Kitech piping. High-rise buildings are complicated and difficult and challenging, and they are a headache. And condos are a whole different discussion for another time, but condos are trickier than most people think.
Actually, we'll have you back to talk about condo, because I was going to say to you, I'm actually usually not a huge fan of home inspections in condos, but we can definitely have you back to talk about that. But before I let you go, one thing that I think is important for people to understand, because there are qualified not inspectors, but maybe you would call them, I guess, is there's 3 things that I've found that would not fall under your auspices. So one of them is swimming pools. You guys don't do swimming pools.
We don't. We can get you someone to do it, but we don't at Carson Dunlop do it in-house. That's correct.
So that's one thing. So it's really just the structure of the home. 2 is mold.
And we don't do mold per se, but we do look closely for moisture. We do also have a service that employs the thermal imaging cameras to help identify what I call hidden moisture, which almost always goes hand in hand with mold. So, yes.
Right. Or active leaks. Right. Something that had active leaks. And then the last thing would be asbestos.
Yes. Any environmental issues. So we're building scientists, not health scientists. So we're not there. We don't check the indoor air quality, although we work with a terrific firm who can do all that from mold to asbestos to indoor air quality to toxic chemicals and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So people do care about that, and the health of those who live in the home is extremely important. But that's all manageable after you get settled into the house, and can you take care of whatever's there? Of course, the nuts and bolts of the house, the structure. I should mention before we close off that if you asked me what the biggest problem in houses were, I would answer with one word: water. Water is whether it's coming through the roof, whether it's leaking through the foundation, or whether it's from the plumbing pipes or the heating pipes, water kills.
Old houses, new houses.
All houses.
It doesn't matter.
All houses.
So expect it. No. Well, I would want to leave off with saying that I think that having a home inspection, if you're a buyer, is definitely a personal choice. We're not here to advocate one way or another, but I do believe that it really speaks to people's risk, their own risk assessment in buying homes. And I personally believe in them from a listing perspective. And I thank you. I think you guys are doing a great job, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with me on the episode today.
Rachel, that was fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Good. Awesome. And if anybody wants to get a hold or find out a little bit more about Carson, if there's an agent out there who wants to book a home inspection, it's carsondunlop.com. How would they reach you guys?
Website works. If you go to our website, our phone number or email is there, but you can book an inspection rate on our website 24/7. So yeah, carsondunlop.com is it.
Great. Wonderful. We'll put it in the show notes for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.